Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, Semantic Data Governance for GDPR Compliance. I would like to start by introducing you to today's speakers. We have Jack Spivak, who is a Semantic Solutions Architect with TopQuadrant. We also have Natasa Veritimo. Natasa is a Semantic Data Modeler with TopQuadrant. In today's webinar, Jack will begin with an overview introducing GDPR requirements and steps needed for implementing them. Natasa will then demonstrate capabilities that TopRight Edge provides for ensuring GDPR compliance. Just wanted to review a few logistical items before we get started today. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along by using your GoToWebinar controls. To post questions, please look on the right-hand side control panel. You should see a drop-down box for questions. If you click on the box, you should be able to post your question at any time during today's presentation. We will address as many of those questions as time allows at the conclusion of the webinar. We also have a few polling questions throughout today's presentation, and we appreciate your feedback on those as well. And we will be recording today's webinar and send a link to the recorded version. With that, I'll hand it over to Jack to get us started.
All right. Thank you very much, Christy. And let's move right into today's program about semantic data governance and GDPR. A few words first about TopQuadrant. I just want to say that we believe that capturing the meaning of information is essential. And it's our strong commitment to standard-based approaches to data semantics that makes this possible. Our mission simply is to make enterprise information meaningful. And today's webinar is going to describe how new technologies for managing meaningful relationships in enterprise information can help speed, ensure, and achieve compliance with GDPR. We work with many large clients and government agencies and bring substantial experience and approaches that help build enterprise infrastructure that meets regulatory requirements. Our systems are used in many sectors: oil and gas, manufacturing, medicine, life sciences, aerospace, and lately financial services is not shown here particularly, but it's been an especially significant focus area for us because of the increasing complexity of the compliance requirements. Well, as Chrissy mentioned, I'm going to start with a few words about GDPR, but because we have such a mixed audience, some of you might be hearing about this for the very first time, and others are already deeply involved in the details of your own compliance programs. So I'm going to take just a moment to get us on the same page. The fact is, we all have personal information that we share. We leave our digital fingerprints, our preferences, our life stories everywhere we travel on our computers and mobile devices. The General Data Protection Regulations adopted by the European Commission protect us from unintentional and intentional misuse of personally identifiable information. You can see here that they're quite broad and complex. They apply in general to the personal data of all EU residents and companies that handle data, and they require systems and full compliance by May of 2018. There are 7 overarching principles in GDPR that guide consent, fairness, accuracy, accountability, and the others you see here. And they really establish a standard of care for personal data. System integrators, law firms, consultants, many people are saying a lot about this, and it's making news. It's a big, big thing, and it's going to impact everyone. Great references are available on this, and I'm not going to kind of repeat all of what they say now. But in this webinar, we hope to add something quite unique and valuable to the conversation. I want to share how current technologies in graph representation and semantic data governance help to solve hard problems in GDPR compliance. And Natasa will demonstrate several examples in TopRight Edge, our semantic data governance solution. GDPR is not something that's going to go away or that we can easily ignore. Really severe financial penalties are possible, but even worse, violations can put your entire business model at risk. Enforcement actions can prohibit processing the data that drives revenues. And before we dig into this complexity any more deeply, I'm going to ask Christy's help to get a sense of where we are as a group on our GDPR roadmaps. Christy?
Okay, great. Thank you, Jack. If you'll go ahead and post the polling question. The first question is, what stage are you in with understanding and complying with GDPR? So if you'll select one of the following, just becoming aware of GDPR and its implications, understanding its applicability and scope for my company, researching and planning how to comply with GDPR, evaluating processes and tools to assist in complying with GDPR, and then finally in the process of implementing tools to become GDPR compliant. Okay, it looks like we'll give another couple of seconds here for folks to answer. Okay, Jack, if you want to go ahead and publish that poll.
Sure, Chris.
Okay, so I don't think it's surprising that most of you are just becoming aware of GDPR and its compliance and looking to understand the applicability. So thanks for that quick poll, and Jack, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, well, it looks like we're more or less on target. There's a lot here at a basic level about GDPR, but I promise I'm going to get back to more of the details very soon. Complying with GDPR is hard because it's complex, and it touches every level of very complex businesses. And here's one example of why. There's enormous variety in the types of personal data and the roles in which we generate it and where it's found. It would be no surprise that social security numbers and personal information like your birthplace need to be protected. But it turns out that because of phones, your geolocations, and even search preferences are subject to these regulations. Beyond this, there's additional complexity. Another reason it's difficult is in the complexity of the questions that we have to answer for complying with GDPR. And with the varying perspectives that different users bring to this, different users need to know different things and will ask different questions. Even more difficult, there are multiple levels to this complexity, from individual data to entire systems that need to be compliant, and beyond this, unknowns to design for, with evolving regulations, new data offerings, and new partnering models. So we may never make this simple, but we know we have to make it simpler to reduce cost of complying and the risks of failure. Which brings me to the point. And we all get that it's complex, but even the complexity I've mentioned doesn't really capture the whole picture. I'm going to talk now about what's really so hard about data protection and how we can solve these problems. The hard part is that the complexity is not just about the data, but more significantly, it's about the flow and about the situations in which the data finds itself. And GDPR regulations apply differently in different situations. We need a simple answer, but it's not about finding the data and locking it up. We need to be able to address or talk about a chain of relationship because GDPR compliance is not just about the data. It's all about how things are related and where the data flows. So here's a simple example of how relationships connect personal data. In this case, if you can see my cursor, like the customer name that might live in a database column, to a process like a piece of software that's used in a situation like transport outside the EU, and connects this all the way to particular regulations about consent coming from the GDPR law. So this is a complex connected sequence, and technology exists to make discovering this chain of relationship easier. Graph-based data representations are a technology that represents both your data and all of its relationships. Graph-based data representation allows us to describe the chain of relationship on the previous slide, but I want to emphasize that in GDPR, simple chains are rarely enough to represent networks of relations and accountabilities. Personal information requires us to track many patterns of regulatory relationships with different types of regulatory things. Graph representations allow that. And even more important, graphs enable us to manage unknown complexity, by simply adding new things and relationships easily. Because when new regulations like these or new partners suddenly appear, connections expose personal information and impact compliance. If you already understand these graphs, please bear with me for just a moment as I take a very high-level overview of how we capture this information. And as I said, I'll get back to the practical detail in just a moment. So graph-based data representations tame complexity by making relationship primary and, beyond that, machine readable. You saw that multiple things in relationships describe a path from personal information to regulations, and graphs are just extended networks of these things and relationships. TopRight Edge uses relationships in pre-built graphs to directly capture the meaning and information needed for GDPR compliance. Why do we care so much about relationship? Well, because knowing all of what relates to our situations is exactly what allows us to understand the actions needed for compliance and whether or not we've taken them. And graphs allow us to talk with great precision about how personal information is connected and what this means. Well, what do we need to talk about? If we need to talk about these things, a lot. There are actions in which personal data is involved. You can see a few of them here, and obligations to consider as well. And these are just a few of the many activities that GDPR regulates. These must be understood and governed, and any GDPR compliance system has to be designed to track and account for how personally identifiable information relates to each of these activities. Again, it's all about relationships. So, how do we do that? Well, that's where semantics comes in. Semantics is about capturing meaning to make it available for good decision making, simply and flexibly, just like ordinary sentences. Semantics describe the things we care about and how they relate to each other. Things and relationships. The meaning lives or is captured in the relationships. It's just like language. In fact, it is language, and having a common language makes communication possible. Semantic standards are a common language. Today, as a result of the 15-year effort by the W3C, a collection of standards enable the capture and communication of the meaning needed for GDPR compliance. How does this happen? The W3C standards stack together in a system that allows us to say things, to share a common vocabulary for saying them, to meaningfully organize what we're saying, ask about what's been said, and finally, to verify all of this with rules. Standards also afford data portability, interoperability, collaboration, and consistency for GDPR compliance. And this is really good because GDPR actually requires data portability as one of its regulations. That's as much of an overview as I can share at this point about how these very capable technologies enable GDPR compliance in general. And this is actually a good spot to pause. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Christy, for another quick poll.
Yes. Thank you, Jack. Jack has given us a high-level overview of graph representations, but we would like to know how familiar you are with graph representations and their capabilities. So, Jack, if you'll just go ahead and publish that poll.
Okay. Should be seeing it.
Yes, thank you. So if you'll just take 1 second and answer this question on how familiar you are with graph representations. Not at all. I have heard of them and want to know more. You understand their applicability and benefits to your company. Your organization is actively exploring their use, or you work with them currently and know their capabilities. So we'll just give a couple more seconds. It looks like most of you have voted. So Jack, if you want to go ahead and share those results.
Okay.
Very few of you are not at all familiar, and it looks like a good portion of you are currently working with them. So that's great. Thank you. Jack?
Okay. That's kind of exciting. I'm a little bit surprised that as many people are currently using them as that shows. Maybe you've all decided to come to the webinar, but it's pretty exciting. So mentioned all of this about standards and graphs in general, and I promised to get back to the detail, and I'm going to do that right now. So how does TopRight Edge use graph representation and semantic standards in GDPR compliance? I'm privileged to be on the team tackling exactly this problem at TopQuadrant. And in TopRight Edge, what we did was to create pre-built foundational standardized graph representations so that you don't have to. In this example here, you can see a small segment of a graph representing the complexity of regulation and regulatory compliance concepts in general. And you see things like types of regulations, articles of law stipulating them, regulated parties, regulated activities. These are the things and relations of regulation. And here, similarly, is an excerpt of a graph describing GDPR regulation and GDPR concepts in particular. GDPR is more specific. And so here you can see things like the notion of a GDPR regulated process and a GDPR regulated data activity. Well, this is where the rubber meets the road. We've, excuse me, we've taken these conceptual graphs and built them directly into TopRight Edge and made them available for use. And Natasha will be showing you that next. So beyond the notion of regulation and the notions of GDPR, we've captured an additional set of graphs. And in this excerpt that you see here, we represent the relationships necessary to connect your own enterprise information, processes, and resources to the previous regulatory and GDPR graphs. And the power of TopRight Edge in doing this is that we bring all of these graphs together into a connected knowledge base that can be queried for insights, reports, and decision support. I'm going to turn it over to Natasha right now, and she'll demonstrate how this looks in TopRight Edge. For an example, directly from the GDPR, we're going to talk in this demo about how data transmitted outside the EU can be tagged and see what regulations might apply. This is a little bit of a complicated picture, but if you follow the large blue boxes here, we're going to show you how we can move and walk this graph from the data elements, in this case, customer name information, through a piece of software that might use them in a particular process, and how that process lives in a context, and finally, how regulatory obligations apply to that and where in the GDPR these regulations originate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Natasha.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Can you see my screen? I hope you can. Okay, Jack, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me first orient you a bit in our environment, and what you see here is the homepage of TopRight Edge. Edge is a comprehensive data governance environment where you can centralize the collection and distribution of the different types of your organization assets. You can see collections of assets here in your left. Of course, your organization will involve data assets. Data assets here collection can be used to describe all your databases, the tables, the columns, the views, but also the logical models and their mapping to the physical ones. Enterprise assets here capture the information of your business processes, your reports, your activities, procedures, and goals. Technical assets are about infrastructure. Here you can describe all your software applications, ETL scripts, SQL scripts, servers, everything that has to do with infrastructure. All these collections are connected together, as Jack described. And today we will focus on compliance assets, and so how you can use all this interconnected data from data, technical, and enterprise assets to identify compliance with different regulations, and more specifically GDPR. Compliance assets are all about regulations, language of GDPR, forms, compliance procedure, and informational documents. For our demo today, we will use an example compliance asset that we have named Top Bank Corp, which brings together datasets that you can find in the banking domain. And let's go into our production copy. Okay. In today's demo, we are going to be based on a user story. Let's imagine that I am a data protection officer, and I have identified that I have a data element that contains personally identifiable information. That data element might be a database column in a database. It might be a logical attribute in your logical model. It might even be just a column in a report. But for today, let's say that we want to mark as personal identifiable information, as PII, as we will say today, a database column which says customer name. Let me search for it, customer name, and the database column customer name from the table customer. And here on your right, you can see more information about this database column. And I'm gonna edit customer name now and mark it as PII. As you see, Edge gives me all the information that I can track for a specific data element. So I can just go and say, yes, I want the personal identifiable information property to be true. And maybe I want also to choose a criticality level. I want you to see that I choose this from a control drop-down list. Later on, I will explain why these control lists are important. But for now, let's just put medium criticality. I also want to choose a personal data category. It is important in GDPR because some categories might have different obligations. For example, criminal convictions have tighter controls under GDPR directive. For now, let's just say that we have general personal data category, and I think that's enough for now, and I will just save my changes. Okay, and now I have marked my database column, customer name, as PII. Is that enough? Can I understand just by marking a data element as PII what are my GDPR obligations? The answer is no. As you see here in the bottom, my database column is input in several applications. For example, we see that is an input in a Scala application. My compliance with GDPR regulations derive from how my data element flows in my application, in my processes. Where does this flow take place and who is accessing it? In a few words, my compliance obligations depend on the situation that my PII data finds itself in. It depends on what we call in Edge situated process. And let's go and see some example of situated process. Okay, we see here 4 examples. I want you to note the number just because later on it might change. And let's examine one of them. So I see that I have a situation where my database column customer name is transmitted outside EU from Belgium to United States, and it is accessed by a third party called Amazon. Maybe we will understand it better if we see it in a visualized way. So let me create a neighborgram. Okay. So a software application named Scala, which actually was located in Belgium, it's transmitting data outside the EU, and exactly it transmits data in United States, and it is accessed by, in my example, Amazon, for example, a third party. Since this application finds itself in this situation, all the input of this application, let me choose only the input, finds themselves in the same situation too. And since my customer name column is an input in this application, my database column finds itself in this situation too. Let me go back to the form view. So here again, we see the data of the process. And of course, we can follow the link, we can navigate and see more information. For example, we can navigate and see that the Scala is a software program, and we can again see the input columns and the output. I want you to notice that one of the inputs is my customer name, and it says here some more information. It says that it's encrypted by a specific method. That is why I didn't want to state what is the encryption method in the data element level, because the specific database column, customer name, it is encrypted only in this application, in this context. Sometimes we need to say that this information is valid only on the flow of the data and not on the data element in general. And that is how we do it. And let's go back. And again, I want now to see that we have a location where the application is taking place and a target location where the data are transmitted. If I go and edit my situated process, you will see that again, these locations are taken from control lists. Let me pick Greece. No, okay, let me put Belgium back. Okay. Why is it important to pick your values from control lists? Here, Belgium and United States are not simple strings that someone can just type wrong or type differently. For example, another user of Edge could go and say that this is USA. Control drop-down lists are about things and relationships, as Jack described. They are rich structures on their own right. We must know, for example, which countries are in EU. Here we know that Belgium, I followed the link on Belgium, and I see that it belongs to Europe, and it also belongs to European Union. Only certain things can have certain relationships. Control lists allows us to have things and relationships right. That way they facilitate integrations and information discovery. Okay. Now we'll go back to my situated process, and now I have all the information I need for my GDPR compliance. I have the data elements, if they are PII, where do they flow, who is accessing it, and where. that gives me all I need to know to define my conditional permissions or my obligations under the GDPR European Commission Directive. In Toprate Edge, we have gone a step further, and we have also created a knowledge-based engine that, based on this structure information, it identifies automatically what are my GDPR permissions, conditions, obligations, and what are the forms and documents needed. Let's go and see that. I can go and generate my knowledge base by just pressing this button and this blue button. Okay, so I have 54 new information items. And let me go again in the production copy and see what is this all about. Let me go to my situated processes. Okay, if you remember before, we had 4 processes and now we have 6. Let's first see what changed to the one that already was there and then see what were the new ones. Okay, if you remember, my customer name was transmitted outside EU, and in this process we only had 4 information items, but now we have a new one that says that this process now is subject to several conditional permissions, conditional permission with supervisory authorization, permitted only with safeguards, and also that my situated process is subject to some obligations, and I can always follow the link and see more information about it. And I see that is subject to demonstration of consent, and a lot of information about this obligation. For example, I can see where this obligation was stipulated from the actual European Commission directive. It says that the controller should be able to demonstrate that the data subject has consented to process this personal data. And we see that this came from Article 7. We also have other information. For example, has required compliance resource here that actually gives you all the documents that may be useful for this obligation to be compliant with this obligation. We have a document with a procedure that you may need to transfer data in third countries, and there are also the forms, the actual forms that the data subject has to sign, and you can also download it from here. I don't think I need to download it now. So I have a lot of information. Maybe we can also see that in a neighborgram. I have it ready in another window for us to understand what is going on with this data. Just because my Scala program, as we said, participated in a situation that transmitted data outside EU, all the database columns that were input in this application find themselves in this situation if they are PII data. And since they are PII data, they are subject, if you see here, to several obligations or conditional permissions, as we saw before. And our demonstration of consent is stipulated because we always say for its conditional permission or obligation, from where is it stipulated, where in the actual GDPR document refers that obligation. Here it is in Chapter 2 and in Article 7, conditions of consent. And of course, here are the documents that we saw before. Okay, and maybe now we go and see what are the new information that the knowledge-based engine discovered. And you see here there are some new informations about something about customer name hosted in Israel. So What the Knowledge Engine discovered from the structured data is that this customer name column, and maybe I want again to show it to you in an ablegram to understand it in a visualized way. My customer name column was a column actually of the table customer, and this table belonged to a physical schema and a relational database. We can see a relational database here. This relational database was hosted as a service. It actually was provided as a service and hosted in a server that its location was in Israel. So automatically, the engine identified that all my PII data that belong to these tables, belong to this database, are also subject to, again, to obligations and conditional permissions. It find it automatically. Our knowledge-based engine is actually a set of rules that run on this structured interconnected data. And these rules are written, as Jack said, with open W3C standards, so you can see them. And most importantly, you can change them and tailor them to your needs and create maybe your own rules depending on your business needs. Of course, based on all this data that we have available, that it's underneath in the knowledge graph, you can do your own queries. And for example, we might say that I want to search for all the data elements that I have tagged as PII, all the PII elements I have in my asset. So I can go to advanced search here and search where I have personal identifiable information true. And personal data category, let's put general, if I want to find only the ones that belong to the general category, and I press search, and I have the data columns that I have marked as PII. Of course, I can make many more queries. I can show me all the PII elements that are involved in this report, track where they came from, and much more. So we saw in our demo today how the data protection officer, can mark a data element as PII. And then with the knowledge-based engine, I identified what are my GDPR obligations for it. And that was all for me. And now I turn it back to Jack. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Natasha. That really demonstrates a lot of the capability that Edge has. I'm just going to go ahead and review a little bit what Natasha showed you in a more general way. The last thing she showed you there was the knowledge base and the knowledge engine. And the whole point is that what we've prepared in Edge helps to answer questions. So she showed a few of the questions, but we might want to do other queries. Who are my data partners? What data do I share? What resources do I have for complying with the regulations in different countries? So there's an awful lot that is built in here and can be extended. The knowledge base also helps to understand how our enterprise contexts and the critical aspects of these contexts relate to your compliance activities. And finally, the pre-built models for documents, for situated processes, for all of the things that she was showing you and more, how these pre-built models can speed capturing your organization's specific knowledge that's needed for GDPR compliance. Well, that's what the knowledge base does. You also saw how TopRight Edge's knowledge engine can apply rules that help automate a variety of required GDPR compliance activities and the assessments and verifications that are also required. And Christy, I think we have a final quick poll.
Yes, Jack, thank you. And thanks everyone for participating in our polls today. This is the final question, as Jack mentioned. And Jack, you can go ahead and publish that to the screen. That'd be great. So the question is, what are your biggest challenges in becoming GDPR compliant? So if you want to select one or more of the following: understanding GDPR and its applicability to my company, addressing the many use cases needed to comply with GDPR, planning for the roles, people, tasks, processes needed, evaluating and implementing the technology your systems needed, and finally deploying solutions that enable the data protection by design, as Jack talked about earlier. So we've got a couple seconds and we'll let everyone have a chance to make.
Looks like you're still changing there just a little bit, Christy.
Okay. All right. I think we can probably go ahead and share, Jack.
Okay.
There we are. Okay, so pretty good mix of responses. Understanding 48% and evaluating and implementing the technology is another 48%. So take a second to look at what your peers or how your peers responded. And again, thank you so much for taking the time. And Jack, back to you.
All right, Christy, thank you. And we've shared quite a bit about the details of personal data protection. And I want to close the presentation portion of today's webinar with a broader perspective. Article 25 of the GDPR, data protection by design and by default, requires something quite a bit larger than we've been speaking about so far. And I've excerpted the key points here. Article 25 requires governance. It requires controllers specifically to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures. Now, Natasha demonstrated that TopRight enterprise data governance provides such measures, but Edge handles compliance cases like these because it's not just a tool. Edge is a complete pre-built semantic data governance framework. Edge models, features, and capabilities provide the coverage, the flexibility, and the insight needed for governing effective GDPR compliance programs. How do we provide these capabilities in Edge? TopRight Edge uses the simple notion of assets that Natasha introduced to capture and organize diverse enterprise metadata, including the tagging of personally identifiable information, but much more. Edge maps the diversity of your organization's information assets to this rich standardized data model, and these mappings organize your information conveniently to help build your unique compliance program. And because each compliance program is unique, these mappings can be easily extended or customized as needed with the packages that you see here on the left. So you've just seen a few of TopRight Edge's features, and we don't have time in this webinar to present it all, but there's a rich feature set available with collaboration, audit and change control, notifications, workflow management, and especially data quality controls, but much, much more. And together, these features and the capabilities that they offer support a broad range of use cases in governance and compliance. You can see a few of those here. And we'll be, as Christy mentioned, sending these slides after, so you don't have to read it all. But I want to mention just one overarching capability in closing because it's so important. With so much focus on what's inside, you might wonder, will Edge be yet another silo in my organization? Yet another impenetrable collection of data that doesn't communicate well? TopRight products are designed from the ground up to integrate with other business systems. And this is a really complex slide. I don't expect you to read it all, but I'm showing it here simply to share that everything you've seen in TopRight Edge is not only available in the user interface. Edge is designed specifically to distribute information that's saved in a central repository. There's many common inputs and output formats that are available for data exchange, and all data is available both for bulk import, export, but it's also directly available in real time through web services. And all I can say about this is, please contact us. We can explore how best to support your environment and needs. We interact routinely with all sorts of data warehouses, portals, in-house applications, and would love to talk more about that. So finally, just to summarize the benefits of Edge that support GDPR compliance programs, TopRight Edge is a full data governance framework. It offers flexibility and extensibility. Why? Because of semantic standards, we can talk about any types of things and relationships needed. We can connect your PII and regulated activities with policies and enforcement. This is because of graph technology. Graph technology maps anything to anything. We can also minimize what you have to understand, design, and create, because pre-built enterprise and regulatory compliance models reduce cost and speed your compliance. And finally, TopRight Edge helps you to understand your GDPR exposures and your compliance status. The connections that we've created enable complex queries for meaningful insight. So that pretty much finishes what we have to share today about semantic data governance for GDPR and Edge. And I want to thank you for your attention and change gears a bit because we promised time for a few questions. And Christy, I'll hand it back to you again to handle that.
Great, thank you, Jack, and thank you, Natasha, for that presentation today. If you haven't already, please submit your questions and discussion points in the question box located in the right-hand side control panel. We'll go ahead and get started. We have a couple of questions here. The first one is, Natasha, I think this one will be for you. You have shown support for the management of several types of information elements and their connections needed to address GDPR. But how does the data get into your governance environment? Natasha, can you take that?
Yes, Christy, sure. Okay, so if you already use TopRight Edge for data governance, then most of the information is already there in the environment, and you just need to annotate your data element as PII. If you haven't used Edge before, then we provide a spreadsheet template, and I can show it. You can use it to import data in a structured manner as we have them in Edge. I can show it because I use the same template to import data for the demo. So here is the one that I use to import customer name. And I can also show you how you can do it. So I can go and create a compliance asset here, a new one just for today, DPO1. This is, if you see the production copy, this is empty. This has only the actual GDPR document inside, but it doesn't have any situated process yet, anything, no data elements. And I can import based on this compliance application template I showed you before, this spreadsheet template. I will just import that. And it's here. No, it wasn't this one, this asset, it was this one, DPO. So let me go now to my situated process. And I have my situated process and the information that I had before. I think that covers. Yes, yes, John.
Yeah, if I can just extend a little bit on what you're saying there. This is what you're showing is great. It shows how we can get the data into the system. But I want to just note that some of you out there may be thinking about an even larger core question that we often hear speaking with our customers and prospects, and it goes something like, well, how can I even find the information to collect place so that I can bring it into TopRate Edge? Well, certainly this is going to be every organization's unique challenge. And as with every data governance challenge, which GDPR compliance is, a combination of people and processes and technical tools and systems are going to be needed to support this. What I think we've shown here is how TopRate Edge provides a variety of data governance capabilities and specific models. But beyond that, what we haven't shown is that identification and capture of information needed really requires organizational cooperation, collaboration, and social networking types of communication and processes. And we didn't have time to show this, I mentioned in closing, but TopRate Edge does provide many capabilities for collaboration, including team comments, tasks that we can assign and track with a workflow, and a RACI matrix. Some of you may be familiar with responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And for all of these assets, this RACI matrix can drive notifications to invite collaboration and like that. So these collaboration tools allow and encourage the people that are most familiar with the data to participate in and drive the identification and collection processes. So that's the social part. We're also exploring automated technologies as well as modern social construction methods that allow Edge to drive what we might be calling the crowdsourcing of knowledge that already exists in your organization. And we're going to be talking more about that in the near future, but we want to stay connected, find out more of how you do this in your organization, but it's definitely a social process. Christy?
Okay, we'll just go to the next question. We still have some time. Where do the lists in the drop-down menus come from? Jack, do you want to take that one?
Sure, Christy. These drop-down lists, well, I guess first, there's really a short answer to the question, and it depends on which one you're using. All of the lists that you saw Natasha touch originate in separate model files that we deliver with the product and reflect the needs of which information it is that the list is being provided for. The lists, for example, of personal data categories and regulated data activities, we derived from categories that were mentioned in the text of the GDPR. You saw her also touching lists that involved countries and their relationship with the EU, and those are included from pre-built geography models and EU data. And there was also a drop-down list that allowed her to select various types of compliance assets. You saw her look at situated processes, look at obligations. These were created at TopQuadrant to provide useful views of various compliance-related items and activities, such as regulations, documents, compliance forms, data-related processes. And I guess I just want to add that what's most important about all of this is that TopRate Edge is based throughout, we didn't really say this, on a model-driven user interface paradigm. All of these lists that you saw there, as well as almost every other aspect of the user interface functionality, all of these lists are driven from fully customizable models rather than being hard-coded into the product. These are text-based models that drive the interface, and they're written using the same W3C standards that we've discussed. So they can simply be modified in a text editor or using TopRate Composer. It's our integrated development environment that comes with the product. And in this way, the lists that you've seen here can all, without exception, be narrowed, they can be extended, or can have the terminology and the labels refined to align with the terms that you would use in your organization. That's probably enough, Christy.
Okay. I think we have time for another question. Let's go to this question. What is the Knowledge Engine? Natasha, can you answer that one?
Yes, Christy, sure. What we call in TopQuadrant Knowledgebase Engine is actually a set of rules on the data, rules that are written on open W3C standards. And you can see these rules and you can change them and you can write your own instead of ours, or you can tailor ours to your needs. And probably you need to change them because maybe your lawyers, your legal counsel might have specific or different interpretations for which GDPR regulations are applicable in your data situations and how to apply them. Or you may want to create your own obligations and procedures that relate to how personal data is handled for GDPR compliance in your organization. We provide a ready set of rules for situations that we have identified, but there are so many cases that we may not have covered yours. Or maybe you have our rules and your rules evolve over time. It is essential that you have control over your data and over the rules on them. That is why it is important that both of them are written with open standards. I hope I answered the question, Christy.
I think that was more than sufficient, and we are right up on the hour, so I think it's probably best we close out today's webinar. Thank you everyone for attending. We certainly hope you found today's information valuable. We will be providing answers to questions that we were not able to get to in the form of an email to all attendees, and we will also provide a link to the recorded presentation as well as today's slides. Again, thank you everyone for your attention and your interest in today's topic, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.